I was married to a man I trusted with my life. But last week, I found out he had been stealing from me for 7 years, sleeping with my friend behind my back, and preparing to transfer my entire $22 million inheritance to an offshore account that listed his mistress as the beneficiary. As he stood in front of me with a pen in his hand, telling me to just sign the tax forms, he had no idea I already had proof of everything. He didn't know I had hired a private investigator, and he definitely didn't know that today would be the last day he walked as a free man. Subscribe if you believe a woman should never stay silent when someone tries to steal her future, and comment where you are watching from. My name is Margaret Whitfield, and for most of my life, I believed I had a peaceful marriage built on loyalty, trust, and shared purpose. I live in a quiet coastal town in South Carolina, in the same house where I grew up, surrounded by magnolia trees and the memory of my father. My father, Samuel Whitfield, was a decorated war veteran and real estate investor. When he passed away last year, he left me his entire fortune, $22 million that represented his life's sacrifice. I never cared for luxury or status. I wore my mother's pearls instead of diamonds and spent most of my days volunteering at veteran shelters. My husband, Jonathan, managed all our finances, and I believed he did so out of love. He would say, "Margaret, you have spent your life taking care of others. Let me take care of you now." We never had children of our own, but we raised my niece's daughter, Lily, after my sister died unexpectedly. Lily is 19 now, intelligent and sharp-witted. She often reminds me of my younger self when I still believed the world was safe. Lily loved Jonathan and saw him as a grandfather figure, which made what happened next even more painful. My life began to change when Jonathan introduced me to a woman named Veronica Hale. He said she was an expert in charitable foundations who could help expand my father's legacy. Veronica had a polished smile and a soft voice that made people feel seen. She told me I inspired her. She told me she admired my grace. Eventually, she was in my home more than some of my own relatives. Looking back, I understand now that every compliment, every thoughtful gift, every act of friendship was part of a larger plan. They were never here to support me. They were here to strip me of everything my father left to me. Subscribe if you believe real love is proven by actions, not words. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Things began to change so slowly that I almost convinced myself it was all in my head. Jonathan became distant, not in a dramatic way, but in the small, subtle moments that matter most. He no longer asked about my day. He no longer sat beside me on the porch in the evenings. Instead, he spent hours in his home office with the door locked, or he would leave the house with Veronica under the excuse of attending charity board meetings that I was suddenly too tired to join. At first, I believed he was simply protecting me from stress, the way a husband should, but Lily started noticing things that I had overlooked. One morning, Lily knocked on my bedroom door holding a stack of envelopes. Her face was pale. "Grandma," she said, "why are we getting delinquency notices for property taxes on the Whitfield estate? Didn't Uncle Jonathan say everything was paid for?" I felt a sting of confusion. Jonathan handled all taxes. He had assured me multiple times that all filings were done correctly and on time. That afternoon, I walked into Jonathan's office without announcing myself and found Veronica sitting in his chair, whispering into his ear with a hand on his shoulder. They jumped apart when they saw me, and Jonathan quickly said, "Margaret, we were discussing how to minimize next year's estate taxes. Veronica is just helping." I wanted to accept his answer and move on, but Lily refused to let it go. That night at dinner, she asked, "If Veronica is just helping, why is she listed as a secondary trustee on the inheritance documents?" The fork in Jonathan's hand froze before it touched his plate. His eyes hardened just for a moment before he recovered and replied in a calm voice, "Lily, you are too young to understand legal structures. This is how charity foundations operate." But Lily was not convinced. She glanced at me under the table and whispered, "Trust your instincts." Those 3 words echoed in my mind long after the dishes were cleared. The real turning point came when I received a call from my late father's attorney, Mr. Davenport. He said, "Margaret, I need to confirm that you requested a transfer authorization to Whitfield Global Holdings in the Cayman Islands." My heart stopped. I had never heard of that entity. I told him firmly that I had authorized nothing. Mr. Davenport hesitated for a moment and said, "The request included a digital signature under your name. It appears to be notarized by Dylan Ross." Dylan Ross was Jonathan's accountant and longtime business partner. I had known him for years. He had attended our Christmas dinners. He had held my hand when my father died, and now he was forging my name on financial documents. Something inside me snapped. The woman who trusted others to make decisions for her went silent, and the woman my father raised, all strength and fire, took control. I decided not to confront Jonathan right away. Instead, I began quietly observing him. I noticed Veronica had a key to my home. She would come in when I was in the garden, access Jonathan's office, and leave within minutes. I overheard Jonathan telling her, "Once she signs this last batch of tax forms, everything moves automatically. The Cayman transfer completes in 72 hours. Veronica laughed softly and said, "She has no idea what's happening. She still thinks I care about her charity projects." Hearing those words burned deeper than any physical wound could. It was not just betrayal. It was mockery. They saw me as an old, naive woman who would never fight back. That night, Lily came into my room with tears in her eyes. She held her phone out to me. On the screen was a recorded voicemail Jonathan had accidentally left while his phone was still dialing. In the recording, Jonathan told Dylan, "After the transfer, Margaret is financially powerless. Once the assets are offshore, even if she discovers it, she can't reverse it. Veronica will manage the funds until she passes, and then everything goes to us. She won't be around long anyway. Her health is declining." My breath caught in my chest. Not only were they stealing my inheritance, they were waiting for me to die to claim the rest. Lily squeezed my hand and said, "You cannot face this alone, Grandma. You need someone who knows how people like them operate." She told me about a private investigator named Ethan Clark, a former federal forensic analyst who had helped expose a similar case in another state. My first reaction was resistance. In my world, problems were handled privately, but this was no longer a private matter. This was a fully orchestrated conspiracy against me. I agreed to meet Ethan at Lily's insistence. The next morning, she drove me to his office. Ethan was a calm man in his early 40s with a quiet authority in his voice. After listening to everything, he nodded once and said, "Mrs. Whitfield, what your husband and his associates are attempting is a federal crime. With your permission, I will gather evidence to protect your inheritance and your rights." In that moment, I realized this was no longer about money. This was about my dignity, my father's legacy, and the truth. I looked at Ethan and said, "Do whatever it takes. They think I am weak. It is time to show them who I truly am." From the moment I left Ethan's office, I felt something inside me awaken. For years, I had allowed Jonathan to make the decisions, believing that was what a supportive wife should do. But trust without awareness is like walking blindfolded toward a cliff. I realized that the only reason they had gotten this far was because I had willingly stepped out of my own life and handed them the keys. That ended now. Ethan wasted no time. He set up a small command center in the unused library of my home, a room Jonathan never entered. He installed discreet recording devices disguised as decorative items and placed a microcamera inside the grandfather clock in my husband's office. He also tapped the landline and synced the audio feed to a secure backup server. Within 24 hours, he had already captured conversations between Jonathan and Veronica that confirmed everything. I listened in silence as Jonathan's voice came through a speaker, cool and confident, saying, "By Friday, she will have signed the final transfer documents. The offshore structure is sealed. Even if she finds out, she can't stop it. Cayman law is on our side." Veronica's voice followed, soft and smug. "And after that, we can go public. No more pretending." The intimacy in her tone made my stomach tighten. This was not just a financial betrayal. It was emotional destruction. planned with precision. Ethan advised me to continue behaving normally. If they feel your energy shift, they will accelerate their plan, he told me. So I hosted weekly dinners, smiled when Jonathan walked in the room, and even allowed Veronica to accompany me to a charity event. But behind every smile, my mind was working. I watched every glance they shared. I monitored every excuse Jonathan made for being late or leaving early. Lily and Ethan coordinated everything, communicating through a secure app that Jonathan could not possibly trace. It was strange being the actor in a play staged entirely in my own home, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The most difficult part was confronting my own emotions. Late at night, I would sit on the edge of my bed, staring at the wedding photo of Jonathan and me. His eyes in that picture looked kind and earnest. I asked myself if that kindness was ever real, or had he always been waiting for his opportunity? I thought of my father, and for the first time since his death, I spoke aloud into the empty room. Daddy, I promise you this. They will not take what you built. Your legacy will not end in their hands. Saying those words strengthened my resolve. Ethan's investigation uncovered even more shocking information. Jonathan and Veronica had purchased 2 properties in Belize under a shell corporation tied to the offshore account. They had applied for joint citizenship in a Caribbean country known for protecting financial fugitives. It was no longer a matter of betrayal, but premeditated abandonment. Their plan was to drain my inheritance, fake a legal dispute, and disappear to start a new life together, leaving me penniless and humiliated. Worse than that, they were counting on my health to decline. In a conversation recorded 2 nights later, Veronica asked Jonathan, "What if she refuses to sign?" Jonathan laughed and said, "Then we use the medical declaration. I already have a doctor ready to confirm she's no longer mentally stable to manage her finances." Veronica replied, "Perfect. We will say we're protecting her from herself." Hearing that stripped away any remaining hesitation in my heart. This was not just a crime. It was an attack on my identity, my sanity, and my humanity. Ethan began preparing a counterstrike. He advised me to let them push forward with their plan because, legally, an attempted transfer under fraudulent circumstances held the same weight as a completed one in terms of prosecution. We worked with Mr. Davenport, my father's attorney, who was devastated when he saw the evidence. He had always trusted Jonathan and had unknowingly helped facilitate some of the paperwork. "I will do everything in my power to make this right," he vowed. The next step was setting the trap. Ethan arranged a fake meeting at a law firm downtown, presented as the final signing for tax deferment. The documents were prepared to look official, but they were actually legal traps that, once Jonathan placed his signature, would immediately activate criminal liability. The room was wired with cameras. Federal agents were stationed in an adjoining room, ready to step in once the confession was recorded. The night before the meeting, Jonathan walked into my room, holding the final set of documents. He smiled gently and said, "Margaret, let's get this over with so you can finally relax. It's all standard procedure." I looked at him and responded calmly, "I trust you," while Ethan's concealed device recorded every word. Jonathan kissed me on the forehead, and in that moment, I saw the truth clearly. He no longer viewed me as his wife. He viewed me as an obstacle he was moments away from eliminating. When he left the room, I did not cry. Instead, I folded the documents carefully, placed them on the nightstand, and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow is the day I take my life back." The morning of the meeting arrived with an unusual stillness in the air. I woke before sunrise and sat quietly at my vanity table, brushing my silver hair while looking at the woman in the mirror. I no longer saw a victim. I no longer saw someone who had been blindsided by the people she trusted. I saw a woman who had survived betrayal and was about to reclaim her name. When I walked downstairs, Jonathan was already dressed in a tailored navy suit, sipping coffee as if it were any ordinary day. He smiled in that measured way he often did and said, "Ready to get this settled, Margaret?" I matched his calm expression, nodded, and replied, "Yes, I think it's time everything is settled." Behind his eyes, I could see relief, even excitement. He genuinely believed that this was the final step before he inherited the life he had planned with Veronica. Lily insisted on driving me to the law office. She held my hand firmly as we pulled into the parking lot. "Whatever happens today, you are not alone," she said. Her voice carried the strength of every woman in our family who came before me. Ethan arrived shortly after, dressed in a plain gray suit that made him blend in with the background. He gave me a small nod, indicating that everything was in place. Cameras were active. Audio was recording. Federal authorities were standing by. Inside the conference room, a long mahogany table stretched across the center. Jonathan sat at the head with Dylan Ross on his right and Veronica on his left. The attorney, Mr. Davenport, played his role expertly, appearing neutral and formal. He placed a stack of documents in front of me. Jonathan leaned forward and said in a low voice, meant only for me, "Once you sign, this will all be behind us. You can rest." His tone had a false gentleness that almost made my skin crawl. Veronica didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the paperwork with hunger in her gaze, like a predator about to pounce on its prey. Mr. Davenport began to read the summary clause aloud, but instead of stating that the inheritance would be moved to a protected tax shelter, he said clearly, "This legal document transfers all existing Whitfield estate funds to a private account registered under Jonathan Whitfield and Veronica Hale as primary beneficiaries." Jonathan's head snapped toward him in shock. Dylan's face turned pale. Veronica stiffened in her chair. Jonathan forced a laugh and said, "There must be some mistake." Before he could continue, the large monitor behind him flickered on. Ethan stepped into the room as the screen displayed time-stamped surveillance footage. We all watched Jonathan on video, sitting in his office saying, "Once she signs this, the money is ours. Cayman account is active. Veronica is officially listed as beneficiary. She'll never see it coming." Jonathan stood up abruptly, shouting, "Turn that off! This is illegal!" But his voice cracked, and panic rose in his eyes. Veronica pushed back her chair and said, "Jonathan, I thought you said she had no idea." Her voice was trembling now, no longer confident. Then came the final blow. Another video played. It was Veronica and Dylan at a restaurant, toasting glasses of champagne. Dylan said, "7 years of pretending to care about her, worth every minute." Veronica replied, "By the time she figures anything out, we'll be on a beach in Belize." At that moment, federal agents entered the room. One approached Jonathan while reading him his rights. Another agent handcuffed Dylan. Veronica tried to run, her chair scraping violently against the floor, but she was stopped immediately. Jonathan turned to me, eyes wide, face flushed with shame and fear. "Margaret, please, you don't understand. I was protecting our future," he stammered. I stood up slowly, my hands steady. "You were not protecting our future," I said. "You were erasing me from it." He shook his head desperately. "We can fix this. We can still be together." I took a step toward him and spoke with a calm strength I didn't know I had. "Jonathan, you stood beside me for years, pretending to love me, while planning my destruction. You didn't just betray our marriage. You betrayed the woman who trusted you more than anyone in this world. And today, you pay the price." Veronica, in handcuffs, glared at Jonathan. "You told me she wasn't smart enough to stop us," she hissed. Jonathan didn't respond. The arrogance that had once filled his posture was gone. In its place stood a broken man who had gambled everything and lost. As they were led out of the room, Dylan muttered under his breath, "This isn't over." But he was wrong. For me, it was over. The storm had hit its peak, and now it had passed. The agents handed me a formal statement verifying that the attempted fraud had been documented and that my inheritance was now legally protected. Mr. Davenport approached me with tears in his eyes and said, "Your father would be proud." I looked over at Lily, who smiled with pride and relief. As I left the building, I did not feel joy. I felt something stronger. I felt peace. Not because justice had been served, but because I had finally taken ownership of my own story. That was the moment I understood something powerful. Betrayal does not define you. Your response to it does. Outside the courthouse doors, sunlight broke through the clouds. I paused, closed my eyes, and allowed the warmth to fall across my face. I whispered to myself, "This is not the end of my life. This is the beginning of the life I choose." Then I walked forward, leaving the past behind me. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that feels empty. It was the kind that feels earned, like the air after a long storm has finally settled. My house, once filled with whispered conspiracies and hidden intentions, now felt like mine again. The silence was not lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time in years, I could walk through my home and feel a sense of safety. I no longer paused before opening a door, no longer questioned what conversation might be happening behind my back. The walls that had once held secrets now held strength. Jonathan, Veronica, and Dylan were all charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Their faces were on every financial news network for weeks. Jonathan's reputation, the one he had spent decades building, collapsed within days. His clients filed lawsuits. His businesses shut down. Veronica's social circle abandoned her overnight. She had once walked into rooms as a respected charity consultant. Now she was known as a calculated manipulator. Dylan accepted a plea deal, but he would never work in finance again. The life they tried to build on lies had crumbled, leaving nothing but public disgrace and legal consequences. But this story was never about their punishment. It was about my transformation. I began to understand that my power was never in the money I inherited. It was in my ability to rise when others expected me to fall. I had always seen aging as a process of fading. I believed that as years passed, my relevance diminished. But during this journey, I discovered that growing older does not mean losing your strength. It means refining it. My age did not make me weak. It made me wise enough to see the truth and strong enough to fight back without losing my dignity. Lily became my partner in the next chapter of my life. She stood beside me as we restructured my father's foundation into something more meaningful. Instead of merely writing checks to existing charities, we built programs that protect elderly individuals from financial fraud, manipulation, and abuse. We created a legal support division that provides free assistance to seniors who are at risk of being taken advantage of by family members, caretakers, or financial advisors. The very scheme that was nearly used to destroy me became the inspiration for an organization that would protect others. At the opening ceremony of the foundation, I stood at the podium surrounded by veterans, widows, and community members. The room was filled with people who had stories similar to mine. Some had lost their homes, others had been betrayed by their children or spouses. I could see the weight of their pain in their eyes. I spoke not as a victim, but as one of them. I told them, "You are not weak because someone tried to control you. You are powerful because you are still standing." When the audience rose to their feet, applauding with tears in their eyes, I felt a rush of emotion unlike anything I had ever known. It was not pride, it was purpose. There were moments of sadness too. Late at night, I would sit in my father's study and think about the years I dedicated to Jonathan. I mourned the life I thought I had, the love I believed was real, but I did not allow myself to stay in that grief. I told myself that healing is not forgetting. It is accepting the truth and choosing to grow from it. One afternoon, I received a letter from Jonathan from prison. In it, he wrote that he regretted everything he had done. He said he had been blinded by greed and insecurity. He asked for forgiveness. I closed the letter and placed it in a drawer. Perhaps one day I will forgive him. But forgiveness does not mean allowing someone back into your life. It means freeing yourself from the weight of their actions. My life today is not defined by what I lost. It is defined by what I found: clarity, purpose, and the unwavering belief that it is never too late to take control of your own destiny. I live every day with intention. I host family dinners again, filled with laughter and warmth. Lily often says, "Grandma, you don't just inspire me. You remind me of the strength all women carry within them." Her words remind me that our greatest battles often come when we least expect them, but they also reveal our greatest strengths. Looking back now, I understand that betrayal is a painful teacher, but it is also an effective one. It strips away illusions and forces us to confront the truth. And once you see the truth, you can never go back to who you were before. You become stronger, wiser, and more powerful than ever. To every woman watching this, I want you to know something from the deepest part of my heart. Your age does not limit you. Your past does not define you. Your trust may have been broken, but your spirit cannot be taken unless you hand it over willingly. If someone has tried to silence you, stand louder. If someone has tried to steal your future, build one they could never imagine. This is not just my story. This is a reminder that every ending can be the beginning of a new life, one written on your own terms. Subscribe to my channel if you believe in justice, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. And comment where you are watching from so we can build this community together.